Okay, we're ready to start the empathy circle, and everybody knows the practice here, so we don't need to go into it. Our topic was pro-life, pro-choice, and pro-empathy, but you can talk about anything that's alive for you, and we may as well just get started. Anybody want to start, and Selecta you want to speak to, and we can just go since everybody's familiar with the practice.
I'll start.
Okay.
Okay. By the way, my name's David. I'm located in San Francisco. I mainly relate with a lot of right-wing beliefs, so that's for my introduction. And I'll be speaking to. Oh, who am I going to speak to? I'll speak to Bill.
Okay.
Okay. So I know you guys did a video on this last week, and I think you've done it before that as well, but I have been unable to make it to these things because I've been working on Saturday, but I'm in between jobs again, so I thought I would drop in today and get my feedback on this.
Great. So I heard that you're interested, you've been watching the videos, but because of your work schedule, you weren't able to participate, but you certainly felt motivated to drop in today.
Yeah, and as far as pro-life and pro-choice debate, I like to say like in the past, I really didn't have an opinion on it one way or another. I just viewed it as mainly sort of a psychological and spiritual and political struggle for women. And I didn't feel too much of a need to chime in on that.
Okay. So in the pro-life, pro-choice debate, you felt you really haven't taken a side, or at least in the past, you haven't taken a side because I think you tend to, it's a very intense personal issue. And I might be reading into it, but also on the right, there's a very strong belief in personal responsibility and personal issues and personal freedom, if I got that right.
Well, I mean, I didn't say all that. I mainly said I thought it was mainly an issue amongst women.
Okay. So, sorry. Okay. So then you felt that that was an issue for women, and so therefore you didn't really have, you didn't feel you were going to wanted to comment.
Yeah. And I feel hurt. Also, in the past, I was pretty apolitical, but I decided to get more involved in the past couple of years. And after looking at the issue more, since it's a very hot button issue, I've come to the conclusion that I agree with the pro-life side of things, and that my opinion is valid because of many different reasons I'm going to get into.
Okay. So after thinking about it a great deal and being sort of apolitical in the past, you felt that in the past few years, you felt like you need to become, or you have felt the urge to become more political. And when you then readdressed this issue, you came down on the pro-life side, and for various personal reasons, which you really haven't, enumerated.
Yeah. I think my main issue with it is just like, I understand that things happen and there's a lot of tough decisions being made by people sometimes, but I think there's no good way of looking at abortion, and that especially with the intensity people are pushing for it, I feel like it's a disregard of life in general.
Okay.
And the act itself just cheapens life.
Okay, so you feel that in the issue of abortion, life is life and is sacred, and that you feel that's really the deciding factor, and that you do know the hardships, and you feel the hardships and the other things that women might be going through, but you feel that in the end, it's a very clear issue of life.
Yeah, and I feel like I feel hurt. I feel like the popularization of the procedure and the trivialization that people kind of attach to it is a testament to people not holding sex sacred anymore, and not owning up to the responsibility and consequences of sex. And I feel like the increase of the acceptance of abortion is a byproduct of the like free love movement of the 70s and 60s, and the removal of personal consequence for certain actions.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is that the free love movement in the past and the more sexual experimentation and proliferation that went on then resulted in more abortions, and that much more care should be taken to the sexual act and the consequences before it's entered into. And that's where for you, the abortion decision resides, at that, the initial sexual contact, that you should be thinking about all the ramifications at that time.
Yeah, I feel like it's a very deep issue, and I took issue at some of these more extreme pro-choicers. They almost treat the procedure like throwing away a used condom, and it's not that. And yeah, it's just, I think
Okay.
it's a gross way of looking at it.
Sure. So you feel that a lot of people that you called strong pro-choicers sort of feel that they're very cavalier, they're very light about abortion, and they threw away throwaway used condom, and don't really take the care to really give the sexual act and the whole issue of birth the kind of care and thought it deserves.
Okay, I feel hard. That's all I really have to say at the moment.
Okay, sure. Thanks, David. Okay. All right, Edwin.
Okay.
Okay.
Just a second, I have to get the timer here.
Okay.
Just there we go. So 6 minutes.
Oh, 6 minutes. Okay. All right. Well, when I've engaged with pro-lifers, I'm pro-choice, I'll say that. When I've engaged with pro-lifers, and what I'm really struck with, David, is that is the care and the thought and the struggle that goes into their thinking. And I find that it's very similar to than any contentious issue that I have. And so I first find myself really respecting the struggle that we're all in. We may come up with different ideas or opinions, but the struggle to try to take both sides of it, think about, what's the best thing, is something that I find in common for people who are activists.
Okay, so you're seeing as the similarity between the pro-choice, pro-life side, and you're saying you're for the pro-choice side, but
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing that both sides are struggling with making
Mm-hmm.
these decisions, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's like a commonality you see between both sides, is sort of this struggle with the issue. The
Mm-hmm.
personals have a personal struggle with the issue.
Yes, and I feel that in this day and age, people who are willing to go through a personal struggle, whatever their political views, are the heroes of our age. So on the other hand, I also take issue of the perception that abortion is sort of just entered into cavalierly. It's an uncomfortable, painful, and heartbreaking. My father was an obstetrician, and he came to me before I was alive, before abortion was legal. And again, there was a whole ward at Bellevue Hospital dedicated to young, healthy women who were dying because of botched abortions. And so when I think about life, I also include that, those young women. And what I like to see is better. I agree with David as far as let's think about the consequences of the sexual act and let's take precautions. And so that's why I find, not with David, but with other pro-life people who are against Planned Parenthood, who actually provide contraception, they probably prevent more abortions every year than they facilitate. And I feel that that gets lost.
Mm-hmm. So we're sort of responding to the cavalier that people on the pro-life are saying, oh, it's cavalier on the other side about sex. And you're saying, and from your experience with your father being an obstetrician, that you see that that's not true. People are not being just cavalier on the pro-choice side, that they're struggling and it's a big issue for them. And that you sound like you're having trouble understanding why the pro-life would be against the, Planned Parenthood, because of the sort of the being more proactive in terms of, condoms, or, being careful during sex and so forth. So,
yeah. Thank you. I feel heard.
Oh, fully heard?
Fully heard, yeah.
2 more minutes. Okay. Carolina?
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay. What do I think? We had talked about this. I think this is the third time or fourth time that we've talked about this topic in this group. And I think like Bill, I've just seen, hearing people, hearing the nuances, hearing all the sort of the thought processes that everyone's going through, and the emotions that they're dealing with. Everybody is, I see that too. Everyone is sort of struggling with it. They're trying to work it through, and, just having sort of respect for that.
So what I'm hearing you saying that it's third or fourth time we talking about this topic, and you have been observing kind of process that happens during those meetings, all the nuances in kind of formulating thoughts, ideas, points of view, kind of process of changing or finding our own point of view on this topic, as I understand.
Yeah, and having had the discussion, I can see how my web of understanding has sort of increased. Like David, I didn't think about the topic very much, but hearing all these different viewpoints, I have a much broader, deeper, more nuanced sort of understanding of where people are coming from. So yeah, I guess it's sort of the benefit of having these dialogues is it's sort of enriched, deepened my understanding.
So what I'm hearing you saying that observing this process
and taking part.
And taking part, yes, in it helps you kind of raise or grow your own outlook on this topic, and you see points of view you didn't think about, and it's kind of let you I don't know how to say that, grow
is a good word.
So it's kind of benefit from repeating a meeting on this topic.
And I do wonder that there's only 4 of us here. It was sort of a trial to kind of stick with the topic, a couple of times, just see how that worked. And it hasn't worked very well, because not more people came, less people came. So I'm kind of, curious what we could do to bring more people into a discussion like this.
Okay, so you're saying that you did kind of experiment repeating this topic, as I understand, week after week, and you see it doesn't really work. You expected that more people will come, but it didn't happen. So you wonder what to do to make it more popular.
Yeah. And I think what it takes is someone who's really, maybe some people from both sides are really wanting to, facilitate this dialogue and make it less contentious, that they have it has to be like a full-time sort of project, because you need to reach out to the different communities, continuously bring them together. So it takes a really focused, you can do a one-off discussion, maybe some people will come because it's new, but to really have it be ongoing, I think it takes maybe a couple of people from each side to be working at it, to be reaching out, bringing, the different communities together. So it takes a lot, I think it might take a lot of commitment, for people around this. So I'm just kind of brainstorming here.
And if I understand you correctly, you're saying that probably it should be a certain, we need to find two people who represent both sides of this discussion, this debate, and they have to kind of reach their background, political or social background, and try to pull people, invite them to this to our meetings, and it's kind of full-time job to do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's very occupying. So the thing is to find people who can or want to engage in this project, part of Empathy Dialogue that is focused on this particular topic. And they have to cooperate together.
Exactly. And I'm not the person to do that because the topic is not alive enough for me to, be the organizer for it. So I feel heard. Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying that a topic is not very vital for you. You prefer other topics. So you kind of, you are not the person who would do what you think is best to do to
exactly.
achieve.
I feel fully heard. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, because I hear very badly you, David, I probably choose Bill because I don't know. Sound from you, from David is very
okay.
Bad. I barely understand what he's saying. So I'm sorry.
Okay.
I would like to talk to David, but I choose you, Bill.
Okay. All right. Not the first time I've been second best.
Okay. First of all, my name is Karolina, and I'm calling from Poland. My political background is, I would call it a radical left with Gandhian methods. Gandhian means, that means non-violent approach.
Yeah.
And in Poland, we have a lot of problems with these issues. Last few years, we have huge protests. If you Google Poland black protest, you will see a nationwide protest against policy of our government and project to change the law and completely forbid abortion. I stopped there.
Okay. So you introduced yourself. You are radical left through achieving those means through Gandhi and a nonviolent means. And in Poland, this is a very hot button issue. and and more recently, there's been a law to outlaw all abortions in Poland.
The ruling coalition and few so-called pro-life, I prefer to say anti-choice groups, try to force our parliament to pass the bill that completely forbids any form of abortion. And in 2000, now I'm not sure. I think it was 2016. We have a black protest in the whole country. Women hit the streets, and a huge, enormous protest happened then, and it stopped our government and ruling coalition from passing this quite radical law. I stopped there.
Okay, so I made a mistake. It's not a law, it was a proposed law. And a few years ago, there was a tremendous, pro-choice demonstration across a black protest, they called it, and that stopped the law from going into effect.
Yeah, and I was part of this movement, this action, because I am pro-choice. But I had some doubts. I didn't feel very comfortable during the protests, especially when some radical activists, who are my very close, good friends, I must say that they were quite vulgar during the protests when they were speak from the stage, and they just shout "fuck off" and that sort of things. I felt very uncomfortable because it was kind of violent action, aggression in the protest manifestation of very aggressive approach. I felt very uncomfortable during those protests.
Okay, so while you felt very allied and supportive of the public movement to prevent this law from going into effect, you also felt uncomfortable by your friends and other activists who were being vulgar and just shouting things instead of using, being respectful and, for everyone.
And it's actually very harsh, very hot conflict between both sides of this dispute. My side of this dispute become sometimes very aggressive and, as I said, vulgar. It was horrible for me. But the other side is also very aggressive, different way, but they are very their expansion kind of in our country is tremendous. They created kind of terror of for people for doctors, gynecologists who perform abortion, and a lot of doctors afraid to do that. Many women with some in trouble that got pregnant, have health problems, or the fetus has kind of health issues, are left without good help or even explanation. Because if doctor doesn't want to do that, at least he has duty to inform women what they can do, and many women don't get this information. That's they breaking law and nothing happens. It's horrible situation. The pressure to the healthcare system, to doctors, is horrible, and especially in some. I saw time.
Mhm.
Yeah, I saw that. And especially in South and East Poland, there are regions where women can't do abortion if they need that, even
Okay.
because of health issues.
So while you were also appalled by the vulgar language on the left, you felt that the right is this growing kind of movement that also is threatening physical violence to people, especially trying to intimidate doctors. And so therefore, the law says that women, even if the doctor does not do the abortion, has to inform the woman. But a lot of the young Polish women are not getting that information, especially in the south and east of that country, and that's against the law.
Well, one small
Okay,
correction.
sure.
I didn't hear about any physical threat to the doctors yet.
Oh,
I hope
okay.
it will not happen. But it's kind of cultural, very, very tense cultural pressure on doctors.
Oh, okay. So there hasn't been a physical threat, but that there's been a lot of societal threat pressure applied.
Yes, and it's successful.
And it's been successful in intimidating doctors from performing or even informing young women about
Yeah.
abortion.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel heard, fully heard. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Okay, David, I'll talk to you. I can hear you pretty well.
Yeah, I'll try to keep the microphones, turn the microphones down.
Okay, maybe that's it. I was hearing you okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to go kind of off topic here a bit because I'm, in talking, I'm really glad, first of all, David, that you're here, or the person on the right is here, because we're going to have to work together. And and I'm old enough that I remember, my family, we weren't so ideological when I was younger. We supported, Republicans, some Republicans and things like that. I mean, I was too young to understand why, but there wasn't such polarization. And I've also worked in very intense, this is an old Oaks hospital for suicidal adolescents. And there were conservative people there too that I worked with, and it's very intense there. You've got to be there for your work partner. Otherwise people get hurt. And I found that if you show up on time and you mean what you say and you're there for your partner, whether you're conservative or liberal, I had a good working relationship with my conservative colleagues. So I'll stop there.
Okay, so you wanted to get off topic a bit more general, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And you said your family has been very ideological, really,
Mm-hmm.
and that growing up, you remember your family supporting some Republicans,
Mm-hmm.
and you were too little to really understand what was going on, and that you worked in some type of suicide type clinic, I'm guessing.
Yeah, a hospital for suicidal adolescents.
Hospital for suicidal adolescents. You had,
Mm.
I'm guessing, you said partners, so I'm guessing coworkers that had
Yes.
different,
Yes.
that had different political leanings, and but what really mattered at the end of the day is that everyone showed up on time and worked with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. I feel heard. Yeah. And it had to do with that, there were assaultive kids there. There were dangerous people. And if I weren't there, or if they weren't there for me, people got hurt. And so I looked with conservatives to have a a dialogue beyond politics to some core values. Because I find that in those extreme circumstances, the core values, are what matter, and the politics can actually be tossed aside.
So you said you look forward to perhaps getting away from politics, or maybe what I'm hearing is single issue issues, and go into a deeper level of core values with working with other people to gain understanding.
Right. And one example is personal responsibility. That's in this country on the right. Now, I also think that liberals are very, that personal responsibility is very important to liberals. But that is a right-wing, talking point. And that's certainly what I had to deal with kids. And, and yes, they'd been treated badly, and I had to listen to them and treat them with compassion. But at the end of the day, I would tell them, hey, you've got to perform. The world, yes, you've been wronged. You have tremendous challenges, and I'm here to help you with those. And I'm going to stick with you. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to go out there and perform. You're going to have to go and do it yourself.
Okay, so you said that a popular conservative talking point is personal responsibility, but you also feel like a lot of liberals believe in personal responsibility as well, even though the right kind of claims that issue or that stance, and that you were talking about working with troubled adolescents. That
Yeah, you're fading a little bit. Your microphone is fading a little bit. Yeah.
you were working with adolescents, troubled adolescents, and even though you felt empathetic towards like their lot in life, so to speak, that at the end of the day, you tell them that they got to take responsibility for themselves. Basically, they have to go out and engage the world. The world's not perfect, and we all have to go get out there and live life.
Thank you, David. I feel fully heard. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I guess rotation would tell me to speak with Edwin.
Okay.
Hey, Edwin.
Hey,
Can
David.
you hear me okay?
Yep, I hear you.
Yeah, I'm not feeling like talking loud, so I'm just gonna keep this mic close. Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on the personal responsibility thing. For me, that's at the heart of this abortion issue. Yeah.
So it's like the personal responsibility. You see that as like the heart of the abortion issue, and you're sort of building on what Bill was talking about.
Yeah, I feel like it's inevitable for abortion to become more popular and trivialized, pushed for, in a culture that promotes sex at all costs. So I think the more sex is disassociated with baby making, the more people are going to treat it less like the function biologically it's for.
Mm-hmm. So the breaking up, the making a difference between sex for procreation and for sort of recreation, making that difference is something you have sort of a problem with that.
Yeah, I think society is having problems with that more than me.
Yeah, it's not just you; it's the whole society's got a problem with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a man. Sex is, of course, I like sex, but it's like, at what cost? I feel like even I'm not. I wasn't around during the '60s and '70s. Definitely wasn't around during the quote unquote repressive '50s and '40s, so to speak. But yeah, I just feel like a lot of the sexual liberation, even though it might have had some noble, uh, a noble spirit about it, I don't know. I think it's been subversive more than anything.
So the free sex movement has had negative, subversive consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And it
And
sounds like you have concern about that. Yeah.
yeah, especially as the older I get, the more concerned I get about it. I guess, I'm just an uptight, older person now. I mean, when you're young and you're full of hormones, it doesn't take much to convince you
Mm.
to want to like toss responsibility aside when it comes to like getting laid. I mean, it doesn't take much.
Mm-hmm. So now as you're getting older, you're getting more responsible, and you're just seeing that when you're younger, that it's like maybe less responsible. You just go for the gratification.
Yeah, I think historically or naturally, I think it's up to the elders to keep the young ones in line, so to speak. And because I mean, when you're young, you're not really thinking long term about consequences. You're just full of emotion and
Oh, uh-huh.
desire and lust, and consequences be damned.
Yeah, so when you're younger, you've got these emotions, these feelings of desire and lust, and so you kind of need you need the
Mm.
adults to kind of rein in
Mm.
those feelings, because people aren't thinking of the long-term consequences of their actions
Well,
at that
yeah.
point. Yeah.
Now that I'm kind of getting older, I'm starting to understand why in the past they would like put balloons in between the teenagers at dances and stuff. I'm like, yeah, do that more now. Really, you really, they're two magnets. You got to keep them. If you don't
Mm.
control it, it's just a disaster.
Yeah, it's like you're saying that there's this raw emotion, these raw
Mm.
desires and feelings, and it will lead to disaster. And so you really have some understanding, or you got to keep these, emotions, these raw emotions apart, because you're not thinking of what the consequences are of these feelings.
And I mean, like abortion is not a political hill I want to die on. I do not want to viciously fight against or for like uh, between like women having access to safe alternatives and the soulless cutting up of babies, throwing them in the garbage. It's just a bad situation all around. So I try to focus on what's causing that, and I feel like at the core, if we had a more sexual prudent culture, this wouldn't even really be an issue. So like I try to focus on that.
So it sounds like you're trying to focus on kind of before this happened, before there's pregnancies. Like, how can you address the sort of the raw hormones, and maybe with education, or keeping the kids apart with balloons, or whatever.
Whatever it takes.
And even having more thinking more of the consequences.
Or, yeah, or at least promoting that, because what in the media do they don't promote, they promote promiscuity. Sex sells, they're making money, and I don't think they think very hard about the consequences that has on culture and society. I think these people that are subverting culture through promoting destructive instant gratification, even though it's going to happen whether you want it to or not, you can kind of choose what ideals you want to push on people, and going for the easy, like, just do what you want, is just a cheap, that's a cop out. It's too easy. It's just not responsible.
Yeah, so it's really this personal responsibility that, just going for your own emotional gratification, and the culture is sort of supporting that. The media is that you have concerns about this and the consequences of just that immediate, self-centered, maybe personal gratification. That was also 6 minutes.
Can I say one more thing before I go on?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just would like to give a special shout out to the the so-called male feminists that really support. They're really active about their pro-choice supporting, and they are no heroes. They're basically they just, from what I've seen, they just want consequenceless sex. That, it's like, what does it matter to them? They just want to get laid and let the woman deal with, throwing away whatever body is created in the process. So I hardly see them as any kind of allies to women in life in general.
So you've got a criticism of males who are just supporting abortion because you think they're just in it for their own self-centered, trying to get their own self-gratification.
Yeah, I have more to say, but that's about it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll speak to Carolina then. Yeah, I think it's a lot more complicated than what David is saying. I love the balloons. That's great. I don't know. It's just kind of fun. It's really humorous, the balloon thing. I don't know why it kind of, but so anyway, yeah. Maybe I'll just start with that.
So you're saying that it's that you think that it's much more complicated than David explained that.
Yeah, I mean, there's points to it too, in terms of, in a sense, being interested in empathy, that you can go for the immediate gratification, but you're not empathizing with yourself in the future and empathizing with the consequences of your actions. So I totally support that, like a broader empathy of just not, I just want what's, feels great in the moment, but, I'm thinking of the future, empathizing with, with myself, with others, and how others will be impacted. So I see that as like a broader vision of future empathy. So so I do agree with that with David, actually.
So you see it more complicated, but you also kind of accept the point David made about finding pleasure and in present action and not taking responsibility to the future, to the consequences of those actions. Obviously, we're talking about sex. And you prefer to call it kind of focusing on present excitement and pleasure and not empathizing with the future us and other people and consequences that you or other people would face in the future as a consequence of present actions.
Right.
And you prefer to talk about it in terms of empathy.
Exactly, yeah. The other point is, sex is not just all about procreation. That's the one thing I would disagree with, because, women go through menopause and there's a huge period of time when it's not about procreation, right? Or there's gay, lesbian sex, it's not about procreation. So, I mean, having, visceral, feelings, having sex be a form of creating connection. It's not just about pleasure. It's about a sense of intimacy, about sense of connection. And I think we have to see that part too, to it, that, hey, you can be using a condom or having birth control, and it can be really supporting a deep sense of connection between
So you disagree with David in this part that you don't perceive sex as just a procreation activity. For you think it's much more than that, and it's not just about pleasure from sex. It's also about building a close relation, intimacy, and there is a lot of way to prevent pregnancy during such action and build this intimacy you're talking about, which is physical contact, touch, communication is a part of this intimacy, as I
Yeah.
understand.
And it's a very empathic act, love making. There's a huge amount of empathy, sensitivity to the felt experience of the other, a mutual empathic sensitivity. So I think that's a huge part of it. And one thing that supports empathy is oxytocin, right? When we're highly stressed, we have all this cortisol, and hugs, physical contact, lovemaking are huge oxytocin producers. So in a sense, it's like it's an empathy creating. It can be an empathy creating, activity.
And you perceive sexual activity as again in terms of empathy, exchanging kind of physical sensitivity, being empathic about another person, and giving this person kind of pleasure, safety, trust, and all those intimate feelings we can create through this activity. So it's kind of truly empathic action, might be.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Did I miss
You got
something?
it. I feel heard. That was my 6 minutes. I have a lot more to say, but
again, I'm afraid to talk to David, but because still I have kind of after sound what he's saying. I don't know. I'm afraid I will be not able to understand him.
Can everyone else hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So it's not
well, it might be my language skills probably also. It's
I was just seeing if it's technical or not.
I'm sorry.
He was seeing whether it was technical or not, whether it's a technical.
Well, it's a
He's
mixture
muted.
of technical issue and my, ability to understand English. So, probably for you guys, it's not a problem. For me, it is. So that's sort of problem I see here.
Oh, you got muted, David. I don't know if you know. Somehow you're muted.
Yeah, I have a Southern accent, so a lot of people with English as a second language don't understand what the hell I'm saying.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry for that. I would like to talk to you because I'm left, you are right, as I understand. So it could be interesting to kind of interact with. So yeah, I suppose Bill, can you reflect me?
Absolutely.
Okay, I like what Edwin said about sex activity, and that was a pleasure to reflect that because I felt like I'm explaining myself.
Right. So you agree with what Edwin's view of sex was?
Yeah, very much. And well, I focus so much about what Edwin said that I've forgotten what I wanted to say. Let's come back to Poland. Yeah, you actually were all of you were more or less mentioned that my society is mostly Catholic society. We are very monolithic in religion, and this tendency, this political trend to forbid abortion resonates with the other trend to forbid any sexual education.
So
I don't understand. Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry. Okay. So very quickly, so in your country, it's very monolithic and Catholic, and aligned with the anti-abortion, pro-life movement is also an anti-sex education movement.
Yes, and so for me, it's kind of contradiction between those two actions. But obviously, my cultural and political view is different. So for me, it's very oppressive because it looks like, okay, we will not educate you how to protect yourself, prevent unwanted, unexpected pregnancy. But if you got pregnant or your girlfriend got pregnant, you can't make abortion. It's kind of very oppressive situation. Doesn't give any alternative. It's only about forbidding.
Okay.
Forbidding sex and forbidding any solution.
So you feel that the combination of the lack of sex education and also the lack of access to abortion in your country by those political, powers are very, very oppressive because it doesn't solve any problem, doesn't address anything, doesn't educate anybody. It just forbids.
Yeah, and the truth is, doesn't matter if there is sexual education or not, young people have sex, make love. This lack of responsibility happens nationwide. So we have to respond somehow to this very simple social fact that young people it's changing from generation to generation that more young people have sex before they become mature adult, and they are not prepared for sexual activity at all, because in mostly Catholic country, parents don't know how to talk about sex in positive way, and they are not educated well in school about sexual activity.
Okay. So this is an extension of that sort of, oppression, and the young people. First of all, the point you made is that young people will have had sex and will continue to have sex and also make bad decisions, being the nature of the beast. And so you feel that that a response is called for, not just simply this punishment and forbidding.
Yeah, and so that's one thing. Another thing is referring to the movement and this black protest in Poland and all the movements that were created during those protests. I see also lack of, I would call it right action in those movements. I mean, kind of, well, the protest was was against the project of new law in Poland that forbids completely abortion. But what is important is to focus on situation of women that got pregnant, to create comfortable, safe environment for them, good social opportunities, economical safety. And this movement, pro-choice movement, didn't focus on that. That's my feeling, kind of.
Okay. Okay. So in your experience with this Black protest movement, it focused on the access to abortion, but didn't really go far enough in really dealing with systemic problems that young women have, education, and creating a safe place. And so hopefully that they would be more well-informed and whether they decide to have an abortion, but they can avoid abortion too.
Mm-hmm. So, I see time is up. I just want to make one more, add something. Well, there were actions to help women in bad economical, especially in bad economical situation. But it should be a center, a focus, a center of this movement, focusing on women's safety in a situation of pregnancy. And giving women choice what to do in safe way. I believe that's what we should focus on. And that's what create opportunity for women to make choice, maybe to keep baby. Okay. The safety is the clue.
Okay. So you think that there's needs to be a broader, more comprehensive plan to deal with this that includes and focuses on young women's safety and support so that they can make a difficult decision in a supportive manner, and which might even avoid abortions because they feel they have the financial wherewithal and things like that, and understand also emotionally what it takes to raise a family so they'd be better prepared.
Yeah, thank you. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I'll talk to David again.
Hello.
Hey, David. So I, as part of David, it's how we, I understand the sex sells. And I think that is a societal problem. I think our society is really skewed. I come down sort of on the Edwin side and the Carolina side as far as, sex is healthy. I'll say, a few things, but it's not something to be done lightly. I think it is actually a healthy activity. Like for instance, David, just being an older man, one of the greatest things is that people my age have to face is prostate cancer, and the research is very clear on that, and that a lot of times men get prostate cancer because the sperm in their testicles is not moving out. That it kind of gets there, goes, I don't know, who knew? It goes bad. Who knew? But that's one of the purposes. So they say, masturbate. So the medical, authorities, tell you as a man, keep those doggies moving. So I'll stop there.
Okay, so I kind of spaced out towards the end.
That's okay. That's all right.
I had a lot of images in my head.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
So, yeah, let me get my mind out of the gutter for a second.
Okay.
And, you said that you kind of agree with the other two folks here that sex can be very healthy, and that even especially as a man, there's medical risks on not cleaning out your pipes. So
This is true. Sorry, I didn't make it up. Okay,
no, it's
thanks.
funny. I can go there. there. I'm nasty. But anyway, go ahead.
Good. Well, I'm glad. All right.
All right.
And on the other hand, I do think David has a good point about how skewed our society looks at sex. And so, like, one of the things is, there's I never understood personally sadomasochistic sex. And I always wondered, why isn't there like a porn site dedicated to mutual surrender? where you are kind of that, and that's what the kind of, being empathetic to the other person, where you're kind of giving over your, yes, you're getting pleasure, but you're really focused on the other person's pleasure. And as you do that and the other person trusts you more, then it becomes very reciprocal. When that happens, that's a very, very, I think, healthy type of sex.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You said that you don't understand so much the sadomasochistic crowd,
Mm-hmm.
and that you think that you do agree with me that our attachment to sex is skewed. Though I'm trying not to throw my input on this because I have answers to all this, but that you're wondering why there isn't a porn site that's more like more bonding oriented, reciprocal, exchanges are concerned, right?
Sort of, yeah. Mutual surrender.
Mutual surrender, yes.
Right, and just to tell another kind of story. When I dealt with this, I thought about my son. My son is now 27, and so when he was an adolescent, the only kind of thing that I went in to talk to him about sex was not about the act. I just said, son, 99% of the intercourse you're going to have in a relationship will be conversational. So when you pick a partner, pick someone who's a friend and who you can really talk to. And he looked at me and he said, Dad, you're weird. Get out of my room.
Okay, you said that, I'm not sure if you said anything before this, but you said that you had the conversation, the talk that you had with your son was basically telling him that, that 99% of a relationship isn't sex, essentially. So you better hook up with someone you have something in common with.
Right. And he wasn't hearing it that day. Okay. Thanks, David. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess I'll pick Edwin.
Okay, listening.
So much to unpack, because I have like opposite views of a lot of you.
So you got a lot to say because your views are different from what you've been hearing.
What's the best way of putting this? First of all, I'm not authority I don't try to claim to be some kind of authority of how people should relate with one another. I have, that's just up to you, I guess. I've my opinions and my preferences, so to speak.
Yeah, you've got your own preferences and opinions about how to relate, and you're not an authority for how other people should relate. Yeah.
And I'm just going to make a quick jab at everyone just because it's fun, but everyone's talking about this like wholesome, like connective, self-surrendering, like connection. I mean, you all sound like you're boring in bed, I mean, the reason why there's not a wholesome porn site is because it's boring, it's just boring. Sex is a very primal act. For me, I don't know what it is like for you, but it's very primal,
Yeah, so sex is really, for you, is a really primal act, and you're hearing us talk about surrender and sensitivity, and it just sounds like really boring to you. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess you mentioned that there's more to sex than reproduction. And I guess you could argue also there's more to eating than sustaining your body. Families have dinner together. People connect with one another when they eat. I guess you could do the same thing with sex, but it does not change the primary function of eating is to sustain your body. And the primary function for sex coming about is for reproduction. Nothing happens in nature without a core goal. Sex would not be if it wasn't for reproduction.
Yeah, so you're saying that you're making a parallel to eating, that there's this foundational kind of goal, sort of a nature's goal for sex is reproduction. Primary goal for eating is, sustaining your body. So that's kind of like the core of each of these functions.
Yeah, I mean, it should I mean, it's very basic. It's very basic information, and I think it gets overlooked by a lot of like artificial topping and people fetishizing and adding things to stuff. Like you can connect with someone without having sex. Like I have not, especially since I've developed in some of my views, I have not had sex with, in a very long time. And a lot of that has to do with I feel a little need to like pursue people that I'm not wanting to raise a family with at this point in my life. I'd rather take care of it myself, which I do. So
Hmm.
I do think that it is healthy to get a release. I would get in a lot more fights if I didn't do that.
So sexual release is good for reducing tension. You don't get as many fights, and you see that. I mean, you haven't had. Oh, you can have connections. It sounds like you're saying you can have connections with people without it being sexual, and that you haven't had sexual connections recently, or.
Yeah, you can survive without it. A lot of people think you can't survive without it, and you can. And a lot of people try to use sex and eating and a lot of things to fill in the empty part of yourself that you can achieve through spirituality and other healthy connections and stuff. Like me, I try to have healthy, productive, life-affirming connections with people. But I'm also I'm very kinky and some would say dysfunctional. And sex for me is not, it's nothing. There's nothing wholesome about it.
Okay, so inherently, sex isn't like necessarily wholesome. Is it for you? It's kind of a kinky. It's not necessarily connecting, and you found that you can use you have other ways of having wholesome connections with people,
Yeah.
and you don't have to have sex or food for that wholesome connections.
And I think this is also sort of like a stereotypical division between men and women. As I'm speaking generally, but men generally, are able to separate love and sex a lot better than women. You know, and there's a biological reason for that because women suffer are prone to more consequences to sex than men are. Really, you're the ones that are left with the baby. A guy could look for another, person to, have sex with. So there's a reason why we're able to emotionally separate like that.
So you think that men are more able to disconnect from the emotions and the sense of connection with sex than women, and because of women have more dealing with the consequences like pregnancy,
Yeah.
and so they don't have the ability to sort of disconnect so easily. So that's kind of your
Yeah.
understanding.
There's a big poly community culture around Bay Area, just in left-leaning areas in general, and I just don't connect with. I just don't. Personally, I don't respect it. I feel like sex is like fire. Be careful when you play with it. It's not just some casual thing. It's like I said, it sounds like people are having some very boring sex if they're
Mm-hmm.
if they're using it so casually. For me, it's a very primal thing. People murder each other over it. It's just extreme. It's nothing. It's no plaything.
Yeah. So for you, sex is like no plaything. It's like totally primal. It's like it sounds like a lot of power and passion and just all kinds of stuff happening. So it's nothing to fool around with because
Yes.
it's just so primal. And there's also the polyamory, Maury or whatever community that is sort of more casual about the sex. You just kind of don't really resonate with that. Doesn't really resonate.
I mean,
Like 6 minutes too.
I'll say one more thing. I mean, recently I had I don't really have a sex life, so to speak, and that's kind of where I'm at. And I recently had a friend that was in a poly relationship, and she showed interest towards me. I hung around, played around with it. I was like, whatever, maybe I can just like whatever, but it just didn't feel right. I'm just like, this is not nothing I'd like to share. And there's a reason for that. And I would like to go. There's a reason why it's good to not forget the biological function of stuff. When you eat. The main function is to not starve and die, and sex
Hmm.
is for reproduction.
Yeah,
You
so
can
you're really wanting to ground yourself in the core purpose of the activity, and for you, it's for reproduction. And you even had a chance to have a sort of a casual relationship with some woman that was in the polyamory community, and it just didn't seem right to you to take part in that.
Yeah, and I think if people were honest with themselves, they would recognize that as well, and I'm not alone, and that's all.
Yeah, and you feel like you're not the only one that sees that, has that view. So, okay. I'll speak to Bill. um, yeah, I think I don't agree with that. That the like the primary. I mean, I think there's more purposes to like sex and food than just staying alive or or having babies. Those are maybe components of it, but there's other benefits too, so other aspects. So I think we have to see the full spectrum of it and just not focus on the one aspect. Yeah, I don't really see that.
So you see that that the sex and food is as simple survival or actions of necessity is giving sex and food short shrift. It's much broader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I Googled mutualsurrender.com and the URL is available. So.
That's what's wrong with our society. Sorry, I'm getting a little quote.
I just had to check that. See, there was something else. I thought it was so funny. But the other thing I was kind of going back to what Carolina was talking about with, it's like I think of the Catholic Church, which is like, and it's like, how do we navigate feelings and emotions, right? And there's these strong feelings, you have these desires as when you're young, hormones, and you get just drawn into wanting, a sexual relationship or you're having sex. And, the Catholic Church, their solution is, shut it all down. You got to use will and, power to suppress those damn feelings, So that's kind of like, one mentality. And, it's just hard. I'm just kind of looking at what are the different ways that we sort of navigate the feelings, So that's one way.
So in kind of looking at this problem, or this issue rather, you're looking at what about the feelings that come up and how do we navigate those? And the only thing that the Catholic Church provides is a door slam in the face.
Yeah,
the exercise of iron will.
And what a disaster that is for child, molestation and pedophilia in the church. I mean, it just seems like I can't believe anybody's Catholic, with what's going on in that in the church. I mean, that's right. Just like this repressive stuff. These feelings kind of come out, and they leak out through all the different rational schemes and suppression. Right? It just and it's coming out in pretty dysfunctional kind of ways, at least in the Catholic Church.
Right. So the image that the Catholic Church would portray of this iron will, that is, a monolithic wall is not correct. And these feelings are leaking out and has led to a lot of pain and dysfunction and sexual abuse.
And I guess I'm looking at a solution. And then the other, there's another thing is well, just follow your feelings, whatever feels good, just do it. So it has a bit of a selfish, self-indulgent sort of a direction. And that can lead to a lot of kind of negative issues too, especially before birth control. It was led to a lot of, issues.
Right. But and also, so you're saying that on the other end of the spectrum, where people just look at sex casually and don't consider any of the consequences, that also leads to a lot of bad outcomes.
And so it seems like how are we going to navigate these emotions, these
Mm-hmm.
feelings? And it seems that's why I'm so into the empathy
Mm-hmm.
approach, because it seems like it's a whole different approach of its own. It's about having dialogues like we're having here, everyone being able to share the real feelings, thoughts, feelings, experiences that you have, and sort of grow. You kind of grow, and your experience of how to navigate feelings sort of expands. That you can that that maybe the young people they'll have more space and practice for dialoguing with each other to kind of work through issues and be it just seems to be a way of more in a more healthy way of relating and dealing with feelings is to get better and better and expand our sense of empathy.
So instead of looking at things as black and white, either or, you're kind of taking an empathic approach, which deals with the feelings first. And so there isn't a necessarily have sex, not have sex outcome to it, but rather it's a process of emotional and growth and connection. And then the decision comes out of that.
Yeah. And you get a bigger awareness, right? It's like you kind of see, you're more aware of consequences and of dealing with consequences, and just all this stuff of repression. It just does not seem effective.
Right. So then you feel that the dialogue and the airing of feelings back and forth would really help in making better decisions, better outcomes, and eliminate the need for just punishment.
And I think that if we could find an agreement around the value of empathy, that would be a way forward. Bring the left, right, and the community in general, that this is the value that we want kind of going forward and sort of build on this foundation. I think it'd be a lot healthier and support everybody's well-being.
So if the value weren't necessarily stated in some specific outcome, but in the mutual value of dialogue and listening and back and forth, then we have better outcomes.
Yeah, versus self-indulgence or repression.
Right.
Yeah.
Versus those extremes of self-indulgence or repression.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll talk to Carolina.
Okay.
Well, living and growing up, as an adult and living in San Francisco, I was exposed to the polyamory community, and there was this one group, I forget their name, but I couldn't do it, because like in one house, you had a rotation. So if you were in the house, there were men and women, and like it was Tuesday, it was Carol, and then you moved on. And having lived in roommate situations and having a work wheel, like clean the bathroom, clean the kitchen, I wasn't ready for a sex wheel.
So you saying that you grown up in California, San Francisco, and there was a climate of polyamory, and you didn't feel comfortable with that. You actually have been living in such place where people practiced polyamory, and you didn't feel comfortable. You weren't ready for such a situation and that kind of relations with others.
Right. I wasn't living in the house, but I'd known about it. I talked to people, and it.
Okay, so there is a correction. You didn't live there, but you knew those people, and this cycle rotation between among people was kind of weird for you. You didn't feel comfortable with that.
Right. I mean, just think of any random 5 people that you know, men or women or whatever, that you would have sex, and then you enter into an agreement where you're rotating around, and it just seemed to me kind of fascistic. What if I like so-and-so and I want to spend 2 nights with her or whatever, or I don't like that one or whatever.
Okay. So you say that it was kind of pressure that every night somebody
Right.
slept with another person. So it was
Right.
regular kind of rotation. It looks like a form of fascism even, well, kind of authoritarian situation for you. What if you want to spend more time with one person?
Right. So that didn't seem so free. And one person said something about having multiple relationships. I don't think these people, by the way, were very nice as I am, probably nicer. But one person, the line that I got, it says, you can have like 2 committed relationships at the same time, but you have to quit your J. So I said, this person was talking about really having 2 emotionally full relationships going on at the same time, as in polyamory. And
well, I'm afraid I lost part of it. There was just prose and sound, but one of those people told you that actually you can have, for example, 2 closer relationships with 2 different people, and then there is a part I didn't hear.
Oh, but you'd have to quit your day job.
But you have to quit?
Yeah, you'd have to quit your job because in order to maintain those relationships, you wouldn't have time to go to work.
Okay, so the person that told you that said also that it's impossible to have 2 close, deep relationship with 2 people in the same time because it's very occupying. It's impossible.
Right. So that's sort of like where I find like the, going all over on the kind of too much on the free love side. And on the other side, I don't understand hurting someone because they were unfaithful. The sense of ownership and things like that. That's why I said mutual surrender. There's a sense of intimacy and connection, and there certainly are behavioral expectations, but not a sense of ownership.
So the other thing you want to express is that as much as you don't understand or don't feel comfortable with so-called free love, you also don't feel comfortable with approach that looks like kind of sexual ownership. And that sort of relation that has to be very faithful and has kind of I don't know how to say that, a feature of ownership, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thanks. I feel fully heard.
I'm not sure if I reflect you right in the end of what you were saying.
Yeah, you got it mostly correct. I'm not. I wasn't that clear myself, and anyway, we'll just kind of go on with the conversation and stuff. No, but I feel heard.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So I will choose Edwin again.
Okay.
Well, first of all, look what's happened when, today we have almost highly masculinized gathering, so to speak. And look where we end up with our topic about abortion. We're talking about sex. That's kind of
Mhm.
well, usually men end up with whatever they start, they end up about sex. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I
you're
stopped.
saying, oh, there's a masculine
Mhm.
group here, and look where we've ended up
Mhm.
talking about sex.
Mhm.
Talking about abortion.
Abortion. We started with abortion, and we
Mhm.
ended up on sex. So men kind of end up going in that direction because it's.
Yeah, I worked for quite long only with men most of my professional life, and I know very well this kind of phenomenon. Everything ends with sex.
Mhm. So you, having worked with men, you just seen the same phenomenon that kind of goes this direction.
Okay, about female feminists, David said something like that. I was kind of shocked what he was saying. It's very kind of egoistic image of those men. I know a lot of male feminists, and they are very, very sensitive guys, very responsible, and they want to have children. And I don't know. Well, I'm from, Antifa background, anarchist, all different kinds of left, social democrats, and all those activists are very, very, they are great guys. They are very responsible. They are very kind of caring about women, and they are very supportive. I don't know what David means. It's kind of shocking for me because I don't know men who think kind of unresponsible, unrespectful way about women, uh, or using just abortion for getting out of trouble. I understand. Okay, I stopped there. I'm sorry.
Okay, so you're just responding to David, sort of painting a picture of men who support feminism and abortion, kind of going for their own self-interest, being sort of selfish people. And from your experience of having been on leftist politics, that the men you've met are very sensitive and caring and want families and children.
Yeah,
So that it doesn't match what your experience has been, but the picture
yeah.
was painting.
Yeah, I know that if somebody is pro-choice, there is this kind of uh, fear, I would say, even that abortion might be kind of overused as a, as well as pills or condoms or whatever kind of tool for avoiding children, not having children.
So you
And
can,
I don't like it, but
oh,
I understand this kind of fear, but of that sort of approach or attitude. I
so
understand that.
so you can understand the concern or fear that abortion might be overused, and so you can sort of understand that concern.
Yeah. And I'm quite well, I can't agree with this kind of treating sex as primary activity. It sounds almost like it's primordial activity. I don't understand why human as a species can't evolve and change the way man treats sex. We evolve in many areas of our life. Why we can't evolve in the way, in our approach to sex? It's a part of our evolution.
Mm-hmm.
We are changing ourselves. Well, the thing is how we do that. That's something we may concern, but it's not just primordial thing.
Uh-huh. So you're saying this view that, oh, sex is just this primordial, thing for reproduction, that there's more to it, that through evolution that it kind of changes and that we can change like what the purpose of it is. It could be for connection or for social bonding or whatever.
Yeah.
So it can sort of evolve from maybe what an amoeba was doing or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm vegetarian. I don't eat, and I'm trying to be careful and care about any sentient beings. But I understand also that I'm predator. I think about myself as a predator, but I just choose to not harm. I'm trying to be. I'm trying to not harm. I'm a predator who chooses, thanks to kind of evolution and kind of cultural growth. That's what I do.
Mm-hmm. So biologically, you realize that you're a predator, that you could eat, animals, meat, and so forth, but that you can sort of grow, sort of through your awareness and become a vegetarian and kind of change. So.
Well, David discussed with me and with Edwin reflection on our chat that our viewers don't see. He wrote that amoeba doesn't have sex. Okay.
I want 6 minutes.
Okay, just one thing about Catholic Church. It is very conservative, very oppressive in its policy, but not in Franciscan approach. And I don't mean Saint Francis or the monastery, but our Pope. He's much more open to, for example, to LGBTQ groups, and he is much more open to the sex issue, as I understand. So, well, Catholic Church has different strengths, but yeah, the kind of official view in Poland is still very, very conservative, especially in Poland.
So you're just addressing this comment about, so the church being sort of about control and being oppressive, and then you're just wanting to build on that, say there's different versions, different, communities. For example, the existing Pope is more open, but in general it's kind of more nuanced than just, it's all very monolithic and closed. So
yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, I've heard.
Then speak to David.
Hello.
Hey, yeah, let's see. I didn't make any notes here. Now I have to think. I've been listening so intensely, not sure what to say. Yeah, I don't, yeah, I'm not sure what to really address. You just reflect that?
Yes, you said that you didn't take any notes. I think you were a little absorbed in the conversation, and at this point, you don't really know what to say.
Yeah, and so I do appreciate all the direction we've been going about the feelings and sex and all these stories. So it's been kind of a fun, kind of a topic. So it's been, yeah, I find it interesting. So
yeah, you'd like to say that you appreciate some of the directions that today's circle has gone in, and it's been interesting, to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel fully heard for now.
Okay. So do I have time to share for you?
Yeah, I think we've got about 10 more minutes.
Okay, I'll talk to Bill.
Okay.
All right. Too bad me and Carolina have some communication barriers, but we can address each other indirectly. I hope that me typing that in the text thing was not overstepping my bounds. I just had to point that out.
Okay. So you want to make sure you're missing the communication with Carolina. You'd like to be able to talk to her, and so you'll talk to her indirectly, and you were just hoping you didn't offend her or interrupt her with that comment about the media.
Or everyone for that.
Or
You know,
anyone.
I hope I wasn't breaking the format. I kind of was, but
Mm-hmm. We'll live.
yeah. Okay. I also like to say that I can understand how the only woman here would roll her eyes when three guys start talking about sex. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I do think that's one thing that's left out of the debate a lot of times. When people talk about abortion, how can you not talk about sex? I mean, I think that's the core to it.
So, as far as us being three men here, guilty as charged. But when you talk about abortion, then sex naturally follows.
It should naturally follow, but it actually gets conspicuously left out in a lot of the conversation. Like the baby's some kind of, you get magically contract the baby, and then you got to deal with it. I mean, there's something that happens beforehand.
Okay. So not only is it connected, but it should be talked about a lot more in connection with abortion.
Yes. And I just think there's a lot of people that feel violated, like their choices have been taken away. But I'd like to state that, first of all, life isn't fair, and there's consequences for actions. And there's no such thing as true freedom. There's always consequences for actions. There's a price to freedom.
Mm-hmm. So with freedom also comes responsibility and consequences.
Yes. And I just like trying to point out these core things that people tend to like bounce around. Like, one core thing is that when you take a penis and you put it in a vagina, that things can happen. I mean, that there's that action creates life. So that there's that, and people don't talk about that. It's like talk about anything else but that.
Okay, so the physical act of having sex does create life.
No, not just sex. Straight, like, you can have all kinds of sex, but I mean, when a penis goes into
right. Okay. I'm sorry. Yes. So correction. We're talking about the penis going into the vagina really creates the, so there are other types of sex, and that's not what you're talking about. That's right. That's right. And it's the vaginal intercourse with a penis and a vagina that makes the deal.
I mean, and I do think there should be more sex awareness. I'm not sure how much formal sexual education in like government controlled, so to speak. I think there should be a certain awareness, I mean, and there's things you can do as a teenager to fool around, like get each other off and stuff like that. But I mean, people really should not ignore when you take one thing and you take one certain thing and you put it into a certain other thing. There's a hot, babies are made,
right.
And there's no amount of debate that's going to change that reality until we evolve, until we are maybe like amoebas and split without having sex.
Okay. All right. So you I'm sorry, I'm listening. Well, you do believe that there should be some sex education, but you are suspicious of government control of how that's dealt out. But there obviously that you feel that children should be aware of the consequences, especially of sex, and specifically when the penis goes into the vagina. That's the big one.
Yeah. And I mean, there's lots of abstractions. There's porn is a lot more readily available now. So I think that's caused people. I mean, it's good in some ways because you can take whatever. It's a good it's a good tool for certain things. But what am I trying to get at? My mind keeps going into the gutter here. But I actually have a point that forgot what the hell I was talking about. But yeah, I think you can't separate the two issues, sex from abortion. So it's really, I feel like the conversation for that can really change it is cutting the problem off before it starts, so to speak. And oh yeah, and also I think there's been abstractions. The abstraction between sex and marriage and children has caused people to treat it more like it's something not connected with that, and they get abstracted. Keep in mind, there's a reason. I've been guilty. A lot of stuff that seems like I'm being very much against is stuff I've been guilty of in the past. I realize people are not perfect, especially when you're younger. I had a child when I was 17 with someone. You know, I wasn't in his life, and it was just a big freaking mess. And I wasn't ready. You know, and I try every young man that I get a conversation with, I try to talk to them about this because I don't want them to have to deal with what I had to deal with, and then, you know, stuff I have regret about with now. You know, I actually do care. I do give a shit. You know, I do. It might sound like I'm just cold and hard and like whatever, but actually, I care about what people's emotions and desires can lead them. I try to educate them, whether it be sex, drug use, all this stuff I've been guilty of in the past.
Okay, so you really want to make the point that you're not coming off as a judgmental person or superior to anyone.
Yeah.
That your points of view come through hard-won mistakes and experiences, life experiences, and that not only that, you are empathetic and you reach out to other young men so that hopefully you can help them avoid making the same mistakes.
Yes. And it can get extremely frustrating, especially with younger left-leaning folks, to think I don't have an open mind, but they don't realize that I was very much like them in the past, you know, and I get it. You know, a lot of, and I guess it's almost a cliche, like the younger people think they know everything, that us older people just don't understand what it's like when we've all been there, you know, and I get it. And there's a reason why I see things in a broader view as I've lived longer. And I just think, and what's the best way of putting this? I don't fault people who don't know better and do things, get mistakes. Maybe they're just misled, but I do fault people who do know better, that manipulate people and their emotions to sell things or push their political agenda or to be liked more. You know, that's the reason why there's a societal kind of eyebrow raise when like much older people date younger people, because there's a natural power imbalance, you know, and I see older people that are involved in marketing and politics and stuff. They're manipulating younger people, saying, be free, you know, like don't let people cage your sexuality and stuff like that. When those people I think are truly evil, because they're either extremely naive and just will never learn a lesson, or they're just really insincere and manipulating people that don't know any better. And I really, those are the people I do condemn, people old enough to know better.
Right. So you want to make a distinction between people who are, young, naive, or just somehow ignorant of certain facts and make a mistake, and people who do know better and then manipulate things in order for people to do whatever they want, such as buy something or have sex or whatever it might be.
Yeah. That's I think that sums up kind of where I'm at. You know, it's a complicated issue, but I like to once again point out to Carolina that so I know it's probably nauseous to see three guys talk about sex, you know, but I do think that the two issues are directly connected to each other. There's a reason for how I brought it up.
Okay, so you're making that it wasn't simply hormones that led us males down this road.
It played a role, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay. But we're not totally innocent,
yeah.
but that there really was a real connection between sex and abortion that is real.
That needs to be talked about more. That connection needs to be talked about more.
Okay, that really needs to be addressed. That connection between sex and abortion really needs to be addressed.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
sure.
I just want to add that I
Oh.
don't feel comfortable with this situation. I kind of got used to masculinized environment, you know, only man, and I was always one woman, you know, especially on the board of the ship. So
Hmm.
it's not a problem for me at all. don't don't feel uncomfortable with that.
Hmm.
I don't feel. I'm
Okay.
good with that.
Good. Feeling comfortable with it since you've been around it on the board of ships.
Hmm.
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay, well, I'll stop the recording and then